The first time I heard it, I thought the wind had picked up. Out there on the logging roads miles from the nearest station, the forest plays tricks on you. The trees are so tall, so tightly packed, that even a slight breeze can turn the canopy into a living thing. It creaks, it whispers, it shifts in ways that make you feel like you're being watched. But that night there was no wind. I remember checking. The air was dead still, heavy in that suffocating way Alaska sometimes gets after midnight, when the cold settles in but the forest refuses to sleep. My truck headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the darkness, illuminating the gravel road ahead and nothing else. That's when I heard it again. Not wind. Movement. Above me. At first it was subtle, just a ripple through the treetops, maybe 30, 40 feet up. Branches swaying where nothing should have been touching them. I slowed the truck instinctively, my eyes flicking upward, trying to catch something, anything, in the beams of light. And then it kept going, parallel to me. Whatever it wasn't drifting. It wasn't random. It was moving with direction, with purpose, keeping pace as I drove. That's when the sound changed. It got heavier. Branches didn't just sway anymore, they bent, snapped. Whole sections of canopy shuddered like something massive was forcing its way through them, something that had no business being that high off the ground. I pressed harder on the gas. The movement sped up too, staying with me, matching me. If you've never heard 1,000 pounds moving through trees that shouldn't support it, you don't understand fear. I hit the brakes so hard the truck skidded slightly on the gravel, fishtailing before coming to a stop. The headlights froze in place, casting long, distorted shadows into the forest. Everything went silent. No insects, no wind, no movement. Just that thick, suffocating quiet pressing in from all sides. I held my breath, listening. For a second, nothing. Then, it moved again. Closer. Right above me. Not a bear, not a moose, not anything you'll ever find in a wildlife report. And here's the part that still keeps me awake at night. That wasn't the first time I saw it. It was just the first time it followed me. My name's not important. Most of us out there keep things like that to ourselves. Not because we're hiding anything, but because the job teaches you pretty quickly that some things are better left unspoken. Especially in places where radios cut out, maps don't always match the terrain, and the nearest help is hours away on a good day. I've been a park ranger in Alaska for a little over 6 years now. Long enough to know what belongs in the woods and what doesn't. The park I'm assigned to isn't one of the famous ones. No cruise ships, no guided tour, no gift shops selling postcards with smiling moose and cartoon mountains. It's just forest, endless miles of it. Thick pines stretching farther than you can see, broken only by narrow logging roads and the occasional ranger outpost that looks like it's been forgotten by time. Most days it's quiet, not peaceful quiet. There's a difference. No cell signal, no traffic, no distant hum of civilization. Just trees, wind, and whatever happens to be moving out there with you. Tourists don't come this far in. The few that do usually turn back after the first night. Something about the isolation gets to people faster than they expect. Even in summer, when the sun barely sets, there's a kind of weight to the place. And in winter, it's worse. Darkness stretches for most of the day. The cold settles into your bones like it's trying to claim you, and the forest doesn't go silent, it just gets harder to read. That's the thing people don't understand. The wilderness isn't random. It follows patterns, predictable dangers. You learn them, you respect them, and most of the time you come out fine. Bears have territories. Moose are aggressive but not subtle. Avalanches don't just happen. You can feel when the mountain's unstable. Even the weather gives you signs if you know what to look for. We're trained for all of it. That's the job. Most of my time, honestly, is pretty mundane. Fixing trail signs some tourist knocked over, tracking down hikers who thought they could just explore a little off-path and got turned around, occasionally dealing with drunk campers who wandered too far from their fire and needed help finding their way back before they froze. It's not glamorous, but it's predictable, or at least it's supposed to be. There's a section of the park we call the Northern Patrol Zone. Officially, it's just another part of the map. Same trees, same terrain, same wildlife on paper. But nobody likes going out there. It's not something written down or formally acknowledged. No briefing tells you to avoid it. No supervisor says it outright. It's quieter than that. You hear it in passing comments. Stick to the southern trails if you can. Nothing worth checking up north this time of year. Road conditions are better down here anyway. Little things easy to brush off. When I first started, I figured it was just about terrain. Maybe the roads were worse. Maybe wildlife activity was higher. Bears, probably. Or unstable ground from old logging operations. Made sense at the time. New rangers don't question that kind of thing. You assume the older guys know what they're talking about, and you follow their lead. But every now and then, you'd notice something. Assignments getting shifted at the last minute. Longer routes taken just to avoid crossing a certain boundary line on the map. Conversations that stopped the second someone mentioned the North Sector. It wasn't fear exactly. Not the kind you joke about anyway. It was avoidance. Deliberate, consistent. And the strangest part, nobody ever explained why. I didn't think much of it at first, until the day my name showed up on the patrol board, assigned to the Northern Zone for the first time. I didn't volunteer for the Northern Patrol. It showed up on the board 3 days after a storm rolled through and knocked out part of the Southern Access Road. Staffing was tight, routes needed covering, and my name ended up filling the gap nobody else wanted. No explanation, just a time, a vehicle assignment, and a grid section highlighted in red. When I mentioned it in the break room, the reaction wasn't what I expected. Nobody joked about it. Nobody complained for me or offered to swap. They just went quiet. One of the older rangers, Dawson, looked up from his coffee like he was about to say something, then stopped himself. His eyes flicked toward the others like he was checking who was listening. Then he said, almost too casually, "If you hear branches snapping above you, don't stop walking." That was it. No follow-up, no explanation. I laughed, because that's what you do when someone says something that sounds like a bad campfire story. "Above me," I said. "What, like squirrels with anger issues?" Nobody laughed back. Another ranger, Mills, just shook his head and muttered, "You'll see," under his breath, like he didn't even realize he'd said it out loud. I tried to press them after that, asked if it was bears or maybe loose timber from the storm, something practical, something that made sense. But every answer I got was the same kind of deflection. Shrugs, half answers, people suddenly finding something else to do. Eventually, I let it go, chalked it up to ranger folklore. Every place like this has its stories, things that get exaggerated over time until they become something bigger than they ever were. That's what I told myself anyway. The first thing I noticed when I crossed into the Northern Zone was how quiet it was. Not just less noise. Wrong quiet. No birds. Not a single call, not even the distant ones you usually hear no matter how deep you go. The wind moved through the trees, but it didn't sound right either. Muted somehow, like the forest was absorbing it instead of carrying it. I parked the truck near an old trail marker and stepped out. Even the gravel under my boots sounded too loud. I told myself it was just the terrain. Different density of trees, maybe. Sound gets weird in places like that. Still, I kept noticing things. Broken branches scattered across the ground, but not the way you'd expect after a storm. These weren't random. They looked forced, snapped at angles that didn't match falling debris. And when I looked up, that's when it started to feel off. The damage wasn't just near the ground. It was higher, way higher. Whole sections of branches bent or stripped clean 30 feet up, like something had moved through them. Not fallen, not blown, but moved. I circled one of the trees, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe climbing animals, but nothing in Alaska climbs like that. Not on pine, not at that height. That's when I saw the marks. Deep grooves carved into the bark, running vertically along the trunk. Claw marks. Big ones. I stepped closer, raising my hand to compare. They started well above my head and kept going. 20 feet, maybe more. There was no way anything standing on the ground made those. And nothing that climbed should have been that heavy. I took photos, logged the coordinates, told myself it was old damage, maybe from machinery years ago. Logging equipment can leave marks that look worse than they are. That explanation held for about 5 minutes. Then something moved. Not near me. Farther out. A sudden, violent impact that echoed through the trees. Something landing. Hard, heavy, but not on the ground. Up above. The sound rolled through the canopy like a shockwave, branches rattling in its wake, followed by a slow, deliberate shifting, like whatever made that impact was adjusting its weight. And for the first time since I'd entered the northern zone, I stopped trying to explain it. My first real encounter didn't happen during the day. That would have been easier to process, easier to explain away. No, it happened during a night patrol, a few days after I logged those claw marks and told myself they didn't mean anything. I was on foot, checking a trail that cut through one of the denser sections of the northern zone. The kind of place where the trees grow so close together that your visibility drops to almost nothing once the light fades. My headlamp was doing most of the work, carving out a narrow beam in front of me while the rest of the forest swallowed everything else. It was one of those nights where the darkness feels thicker than usual. Not just the absence of light, but something heavier, pressing in. I remember thinking how quiet it was again. No insects, no distant movement, just my own footsteps and the faint crunch of needles under my boots. Then the canopy shifted. At first, it was subtle, the same kind of movement I'd seen before, branches swaying where there was no wind. I stopped walking, angling my headlamp upward, trying to catch something between the layers of needles and shadow. Nothing, just darkness. Then it hit again. Harder. A violent shudder ran through the treetops above me, like something had slammed into them from one side. The branches didn't just move, they reacted. Bent, snapped, recoiled. And then it moved. Vast. Not climbing. Not scrambling. Moving. Tree to tree, with a speed that didn't make sense. One moment the motion was directly above me. The next it was 10, 20 feet ahead, tearing through the canopy like it was using the trees as a pathway. Leaves and debris started raining down. Small twigs at first, then larger ones bouncing off my shoulders, hitting the ground around me. The sound should have been chaotic, but it was. It had rhythm, a pattern, like something controlled was making its way through the forest, not something panicking or falling. I stood there longer than I should have. Part of me trying to understand it. The other part already knowing I didn't want to. Because the ground wasn't moving. That's the detail that stuck with me. Whatever was up there, it wasn't touching the forest floor at all. I reached for my radio without taking my eyes off the canopy. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Unit 4, I said, keeping my voice low without meaning to. "I've got movement above my position. Northern sector, heavy canopy disturbance. Possible. I stopped because I didn't have a word for it. There was a pause on the other end. Then the response came through. Calm, flat, like I just reported a broken sign. Copy that, Unit 4. Continue patrol. I frowned, lowering the radio slightly. You want me to continue? Another pause. Affirmative, continue patrol. No questions. No request for clarification. No concern. Just acknowledgement. That was the moment something in my chest tightened. Because that wasn't how dispatch respond to unknown movement in the forest. They ask questions. They send backup. They log it as a potential hazard. They don't brush it off. The sound above me shifted again. Closer. I took a step back, scanning the trees, my light bouncing uselessly off branches that hid more than they revealed. Then something cracked. Loud. Right above me. I barely had time to react before a thick branch snapped free and dropped, slamming into the ground just a few feet away. The impact sent a jolt through my legs, the sound echoing out into the darkness. I stumbled back, heart hammering. And then, it moved again, directly over me. Faster now. Aggressive. The branches didn't just sway, they thrashed. Entire sections of canopy shaking violently as whatever was up there pushed through with force, closing distance in a way that felt intentional. Like it had noticed me. That's when instinct finally kicked in. I ran. Didn't think, didn't look back. Just turned and moved, boots slipping on loose ground as I pushed down the trail, my headlamp jerking wildly with every step. Behind me, the trees followed. Not the sound, not the echo, the movement, keeping pace, matching me. Every few seconds, another crack, another shutter ripping through the canopy just overhead, like something massive was tracking me from above, never touching the ground, never slowing down. I tried the radio again, but the words didn't come out right. My breathing was too loud, my thoughts too scattered. All I could focus on was getting out of there, getting back to the truck, getting somewhere with open sky. The moment I broke through the tree line, the movement stopped. Just like that. No fatting, no retreat. 1 second it was there. The next, nothing. The forest behind me went still. Dead quiet again. Like it had never happened. I didn't go back that night. And when I returned to the station, the others didn't need me to explain. They already knew what I'd heard. After that night, things changed. Not officially, not on paper. My report was clean, unidentified canopy disturbance. No conclusions, no speculation, just enough detail to justify the patrol without raising questions that nobody wanted to answer. That's how it works out there. You write what fits. You leave out what doesn't. But around the station, the tone shifted. It started small. Conversations that used to stop when I walked in now paused for a different reason. Not because I was new, but because I wasn't anymore, not to that part of the forest. Dawson was the first one to actually say something. We were out back, near the equipment shed, checking a generator that had been acting up. He didn't look at me when he spoke. You heard it, didn't you? I didn't answer right away. Didn't need to. He nodded anyway, like silence confirmed it. Above you, he added. I swallowed, yeah. Another nod, slower this time. Good, he said, means it didn't get curious. That word stuck with me. Curious. Like whatever was out, there had a choice in how close it got. After that, the stories started coming out. Not all at once, not like some big confession. Just pieces. Mills mentioned how, a few winters back, he'd been staying in one of the older ranger cabins up north. Middle of the night, he woke up to a steady, rhythmic sound above him, not on the roof. Higher, like something stepping from branch to branch, directly over the cabin, slow and deliberate. He said he laid there for hours, listening, too afraid to move, because every time he shifted, the sound would stop and then reposition, right above wherever he was. Another ranger talked about seeing shapes in the upper branches during dusk patrols, not clear enough to define, but wrong enough to notice. Something large shifting its weight where nothing should have been able to stand. There were stories about trees bending at night, not swaying, bending, whole trunks leaning just slightly, like something heavy was perched above, redistributing its weight from one tree to another. None of it made it into reports, because none of it made sense. Officially, the strangest conversation I had was with a retired ranger named Keller. He still lived a few miles from the station, in a cabin he'd built himself decades ago. People said he stayed on longer than most because he understood the place better, whatever that meant. I went out there a week after my encounter. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't log it. I just needed someone to explain what I'd seen. Keller listened without interrupting, sat there on his porch, staring out into the trees like he was waiting for something to move. When I finished, he nodded once. "It's been here longer than the park," he said. I frowned. "What is?" He ignored the question. "People used to talk about things like it," he continued. "Before maps, before roads, stories about something that didn't walk the forest, it moved through it." "Like a spirit?" I asked. "That's what it sounded like. Some kind of folklore, something you could file away under myth and move on." Keller shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "not a spirit." There was something in the way he said it that made my stomach tighten. "Spirits don't break branches like that." I didn't respond. Didn't know how to. He stood up without another word and disappeared inside his cabin. I heard drawers opening, things shifting around. Then he came back out holding something in his hand. An old photograph, worn at the edges, slightly faded. He handed it to me. "This was taken in the North Sector," he said, "back when I still thought it was something we could track." I looked down at the image. It was blurry, grainy, taken from a distance. At first, it just looked like trees. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw it. Something stretched across multiple branches, high above the ground, not hanging, balanced. Its shape was wrong, too large, too wide, like its weight should have snapped everything beneath it. But the branches held. Barely. I could make out limbs, angles that didn't match any animal I knew, and at the center of it, a head, turned toward the camera, watching. Even in the blur, I could feel it. That same sensation I'd had in the forest, being observed from above. I looked up at Keller, my throat dry. "What happened after you took this?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at the tree line like he was remembering something he wished he could forget. Then he said quietly, "It bleeds." I didn't ask what he meant. Didn't want to, because something told me I was going to find out on my own. And not long after that, it started following me. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. The forest is full of movement if you know where to look. Animals pass through the same areas, follow the same trails, react to your presence in ways that can feel deliberate. That's what I kept telling myself, until the pattern stopped being something I could ignore. It only happened when I was alone. That was the first detail that stood out. Group patrols, nothing, dead quiet. The forest acted the way it was supposed to, predictable, distant, indifferent. But the moment I was by myself, it started again, always behind me. Never in front, never crossing my path or making itself visible. Just there. I'd be walking a trail, listening to the normal sounds of my own movement, when the canopy would shift somewhere behind my position. Subtle at first, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But I was. After that first night, I was always paying attention. The movement would follow at a distance, keeping pace just far enough back that I couldn't catch it in the beam of my light. If I stopped, it stopped. If I moved, it moved. Like it was adjusting to me. Watching, learning. I started changing my patrol routes, taking longer paths, doubling back unexpectedly, cutting through sections of forest that weren't part of the assigned grid. I even skipped entire checkpoints just to see if it would lose track of me. It didn't. No matter where I went, it found me. Not immediately, but eventually. A branch would snap somewhere behind me, higher than anything should have been. Then another. Then that same slow, deliberate shifting through the canopy. Always above. Always just out of sight. I tried switching to daylight patrols. That should have made a difference. Visibility alone should have been enough to confirm what I was dealing with. But it didn't change anything. If anything, it made it worse. Because during the day, I could see the aftermath more clearly. Branches still swaying after something had passed through them. Needles drifting down through beams of sunlight. Sections of trees subtly leaning, then correcting themselves, like something heavy had just moved off them. And still nothing visible. No shape. No body. Just movement. I started bringing extra equipment. A high-powered spotlight mounted to the truck. Thermal binoculars we usually reserved for search operations. Even a handheld camera, thinking maybe I could catch something on video if I couldn't see it directly. None of it worked. The spotlight would hit the canopy, flooding it with harsh white light, and all I'd see were branches shaking violently, reacting to something that wasn't there. Thermal showed heat signatures from small animals, distant shapes moving along the ground, but nothing above me, nothing large enough to match the weight I was hearing. It didn't make sense. It should have. Something that big, something that heavy, it had to show up somewhere. Leave something behind. Heat, sound, a clear silhouette against the sky. But it didn't. It was like the forest itself was hiding it. Or worse, helping it. The night it got closest, I was back in the truck. Same logging road where I'd first heard it. Same stretch of forest where the trees grew tight and tall, their branches overlapping like a ceiling. I was driving slow, scanning the sides of the road when the first impact hit. Directly above me, the entire canopy jolted, a deep, resonant crack echoing through the wood as something landed with enough force to bend multiple branches at once. I slammed the brakes, grabbing the spotlight and aiming it straight up through the windshield. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a chaotic tangle of limbs and needles. All of them moving, shaking, bending under weight. But there was nothing there. No body, no outline, just the aftermath of something that should have been impossible to miss. Then it moved. Not away. Across. From one tree to the next, directly over the truck, the branches dipping in sequence as the weight transferred, following the path of something massive that I still couldn't see. I tracked it with the light, heart pounding, trying to catch even a glimpse of it between the gaps. Nothing. Just movement. Always just movement. And then it stopped. Right above me. Everything went still. The branches slowly rising back into place, as if whatever had been there was now perfectly balanced, perfectly quiet. Waiting. I didn't breathe. Didn't move. Because for the first time since this started, it didn't feel like it was following me anymore. It felt like it had found me. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started thinking. Because whatever this thing was, it wasn't random. It wasn't passing through. It was choosing where to be. And that meant it could be tracked, even if it didn't want to be seen. So I made a decision, one that went against every protocol we had. I was going to hunt it. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. If I had, they would have stopped me. Or worse, they would have understood exactly why I wanted to go back out there, and that would have been harder to deal with. So I waited until my next solo patrol. Same sector, same stretch of forest where the movement had been getting closer each time. But this time, I wasn't reacting to it. I was looking for it. I parked the truck earlier than usual, cutting the engine before the road narrowed too much. The silence settled in almost immediately, thick and familiar. I grabbed my gear, light, radio, sidearm, and stepped into the trees. At first, it felt like every other patrol. Quiet still, wrong. But I wasn't paying attention to the usual signs anymore. I wasn't looking at the ground, checking for tracks or disturbed soil. I was watching the trees, specifically the damage. It didn't take long to find the first sign. A broken branch high above, splintered at an angle that didn't match wind or natural fall. Then another, and another, each one leading deeper into the forest, like a trail left behind by something that didn't care if it was being followed. Or maybe something that wanted to be. I moved slowly, keeping my light angled upward more than ahead of me. The deeper I went, the more obvious the pattern became. The damage was consistent, focused, not random. Branches snapped in sequence, spaced just far enough apart to suggest movement from one tree to the next, and always at the same height, 20, 30 feet up. Whatever this thing was, it had a path, and I was on it. The trees started thinning after a while, opening into a clearing I didn't recognize from any of the maps. That alone should have been enough to make me turn back. There aren't supposed to be open spaces like that in this part of the forest, not without some kind of geological reason. But I stepped into it anyway. The moment I did, I knew something was wrong. Not because of what I saw, because of what I felt. The air was heavier there, stagnant, like it hadn't moved in a long time. Even the usual forest sounds, what little there were, felt distant, muted at the edges of the clearing. Then I looked up. Every tree surrounding the clearing was damaged. Not near the ground. Not at eye level. High above. Branches twisted, stripped, broken in ways that matched everything I'd been seeing, but worse. Concentrated. Like this was a place it returned to. A place where the movement wasn't just passing through, but staying. My light drifted lower. That's when I saw the first one. At first, I thought it was just another broken branch caught between limbs. Until the shape registered. Too smooth. Too curved. I stepped closer, angling the beam for a better look. And my stomach dropped. It wasn't a branch. It was a bone. Human. Wedged between two limbs, high above the ground like it had been placed there, or dropped and caught. I froze, my light shaking slightly as I scanned the surrounding trees. There were more, scattered across the branches. Not one or two. Dozens. Long bones, fractured pieces, shapes I didn't want to identify but couldn't ignore. Some caught in the crooks of branches, others hanging at odd angles like they'd been tossed there without care. I took another step back, my boots crunching against something on the ground. I looked down. Fabric. Torn. Weathered. The remains of a backpack, half buried under needles and debris. The zipper was rusted, the material stiff from exposure. Next to it, a boot. Still laced. Still intact. But empty. I didn't want to look anymore, but I did, because I had to. Near the edge of the clearing, partially hidden under a layer of dirt and leaves, something metallic caught the light. I knelt down slowly, brushing it off with a gloved hand. A badge, ranger issued, old, worn down but still recognizable. There was a name on it. I couldn't read it. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, one thing became very clear. Someone had been here before me, and they hadn't made it back. The air shifted. Subtle, but enough. I looked up. The canopy above the clearing trembled. Not gently, violently. Branches jerking, snapping, reacting to something moving through them at a speed I'd never seen before. And this time, it wasn't staying at a distance. It was coming straight toward me, closer than it had ever been. The trees around the clearing began to move in sequence, one after another, like a ripple closing in from all sides. I stepped back instinctively, my light darting upward, trying to catch it. Anything, but there was nothing to see. Just movement, and the unmistakable sound of something massive shifting its weight directly above me. Closer, closer, and then it stopped, right at the edge of the clearing. Waiting, watching. For the first time since this started, I knew exactly what that feeling meant. I wasn't tracking it anymore. I had walked straight into where it lived, and whatever was up there was finally ready to show itself. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds, maybe longer. Long enough for the silence to settle back in around the clearing, thick and suffocating, like the forest itself was holding its breath. My hand tightened around the spotlight. Every instinct I had was telling me to run, to get out of that clearing, back to the truck, back to anything that felt even remotely safe. But I didn't move, because if I did, I knew I'd never understand what I was dealing with. And if I didn't understand it, I wasn't getting away. Slowly, I raised the spotlight. The beam cut upward through the branches, slicing through layers of needles and shadow, climbing higher, until it hit something. At first, my brain didn't process it. It just looked like more of the canopy, a shape where shapes shouldn't be, overlapping lines that didn't quite match the natural pattern of the trees. Then it shifted, and everything clicked into place. It was crouched across the branches, not hanging, not gripping like an animal. Balanced, its body stretched horizontally between multiple trees, like it didn't need a single trunk to support its weight. The branches beneath it bowed slightly, trembling under a mass that should have snapped them instantly. It was too big. That was the first thought that made sense. Too big to be up there. Too heavy for what it was standing on. And yet it didn't fall. Its limbs, God, its limbs, they were wrong. Longer than they should have been, jointed at angles that didn't match anything I'd ever seen. They draped over the branches like cables, wrapping and adjusting with small, precise movements, redistributing its weight in a way that kept it perfectly still. Perfectly balanced, like a spider, but not fast, not twitchy. Controlled, deliberate. Its torso was narrow compared to the rest of it, almost compressed, like everything about its structure was designed for one purpose: to exist in that space, to move through the canopy like it belonged there. My light drifted upward, searching for a head. I found it, and I wish I hadn't. It didn't turn suddenly, didn't react to the light like an animal would. It was already looking at me. The moment the beam hit its face, I saw the eyes. They reflected the light back at me, dull at first, then sharper as the angle adjusted. Not glowing, not bright. Just aware. locked onto me with a stillness that felt worse than any aggression I could have imagined. It didn't make a sound. No growl, no hiss, no warning. It just watched, like it had been watching for a long time, like it was used to it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Every part of my body was screaming at me to look away, to break eye contact, to do something, anything. But I couldn't. Because in that moment, I understood something. This thing wasn't hiding. Not really. It wasn't camouflaged. It wasn't invisible. It wasn't even trying to stay out of sight. It was just above us. And we don't look up. Not long enough. Not carefully enough. We walk through forests assuming the danger is on the ground. We track footprints, broken brush, disturbed soil. We never think to check the canopy. Not like that. Not for something that big. It shifted slightly, just enough for the branches beneath it to creak under the change in weight. My grip on the light tightened. For a second, I thought it was going to come down. That this was the moment everything would snap. The illusion, the distance, the thin line between observation and attack. But it didn't. Instead, it moved. Not toward me. Away. One limb lifted, stretching across to another tree, hooking over a higher branch with unnatural precision. Then another followed, and another, each movement smooth, almost silent despite the size of it. The branches bent, dipped, strained, but held. Its body shifted with them, transferring its weight from one tree to the next in a slow, controlled motion that made it look effortless. Impossible. Within seconds, it was no longer directly above me, just beyond, still visible in the edges of the light, its shape blending back into the canopy, becoming part of the overlapping shadows and broken lines of the forest. And then it stopped again, further away this time, watching, still watching, like it was making a decision. I didn't wait to find out what that decision would be. I lowered the light just enough to keep my footing and backed out of the clearing, step by slow step, never turning my back to it. Only when the trees thickened again, when the canopy closed in and blocked my view entirely, did I finally break and run. I didn't stop until I reached the truck. Didn't look back. Didn't slow down. Because now I knew. Whatever that thing was, the ground was never its territory. We just thought it was. And somewhere deep in that forest, it had been watching us the entire time. I didn't file a report when I got back. Not a real one. I wrote something short, vague. Equipment malfunction, limited visibility, patrol completed without incident. Enough to close the loop without opening another one. Because I already knew what would happen if I told the truth. They wouldn't deny it. They wouldn't argue. They'd just look at me differently. The same way they looked at each other when they thought no one was paying attention. But I couldn't leave it there. Not after what I saw. So the next morning, I went straight to Dawson. Didn't ease into it, didn't test the waters. I just said it. I saw it. He didn't ask what. Didn't need to. He just leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and nodded like he'd been waiting for that sentence longer than I'd been in the park. How close? He asked. Close enough, I said. That was all it took. The room changed. Mills stopped what he was doing. Another ranger near the doorway turned slightly, not facing us directly, but listening. No one laughed. No one questioned me. Because they all knew. Dawson rubbed his face with one hand, then gestured toward the back office. Come on, he said. We'll talk in here. The door closed behind us. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then I asked the only question that mattered. How long has it been there? Dawson didn't answer right away. He walked over to a filing cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a folder that looked older than it should have been. The edges were worn, the label faded. He set it on the desk between us. "Longer than I've been here," he said. "Longer than Keller, too." I stared at the folder, and nobody does anything about it. He let out a quiet, humorless breath. "What do you want us to do?" I didn't have an answer, because the truth was, I didn't know. He tapped the folder lightly. "Disappearances in the northern sector go back decades," he said. "Officially, they're always something else." I opened it. Reports, names, dates. Short summaries. Avalanche. Lost hiker. Wildlife attack. The same explanations repeated over and over again, each one just believable enough to close the case. But now that I'd seen it, none of them felt real anymore. "These are all," I started. "Covered," he finished, "or redirected, depends on who's writing it." I looked up at him. "You're telling me they know?" Dawson shook his head. "Not like you think. There's no big meeting, no official acknowledgement. It's quieter than that." He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "People notice patterns. Enough reports come in from the same area, same kind of disappearances, same details left out, and eventually decisions get made." "What kind of decisions?" "The kind that keep things simple," he said. "Safer, on paper at least." I glanced back at the folder. "So they just avoid it?" "Exactly." He gestured vaguely north, toward the forest beyond the station. "Patrols get rerouted, assignments get shifted, new guys get steered south without being told why. Less traffic means fewer incidents." "Fewer witnesses," I said. He didn't argue. "Out there," he continued, "you've got miles of dense canopy, trees packed so tight you can barely see the sky. Whatever that thing is, it doesn't need to leave." I thought about what I'd seen. The way it moved. The way it watched. "It owns that space," I said quietly. Dawson nodded. "And as long as it stays there, nobody higher up has to deal with it." The room went silent again. Heavy, settling in the same way the forest did at night. After a moment, I closed the folder. "So that's it?" I asked. "We just pretend it's not there?" Dawson looked at me for a long time before answering. "No," he said, "we remember it is." He pushed himself off the desk and headed for the door, stopping just before he opened it. Then he glanced back at me. "And we stay out of its way." I didn't respond, because I already knew something he didn't. Something I hadn't said out loud yet. It wasn't just staying in its territory anymore. And if that was true, then avoiding it wasn't going to be enough. Not this time. Because something like that doesn't follow you for no reason. I never thought I would leave the park behind like that, but after everything that happened in the northern sector, they transferred me out before I could even request it. Officially said it was for my health and safety, but we all knew the truth. I had seen too much and heard things that never made it into any report. The new assignment is quieter, lower elevation, fewer trees that stretch endlessly into the sky. But sometimes at night, I still hear the wind move through branches even when there are none. I tell myself it is just memory playing tricks, but memory does not shake the ground the way those forests did. People think the danger in the wild is always on the ground: bears, wolves, cliffs, rivers. But that is not what I learned up there. It was never what you stepped on. It was what watched you from above, between the crowns of trees where light disappears and something waits without blinking. So if you ever hike in Alaska and the trees start shaking, do not run. That is the first mistake I saw people make. Running is what it wants. It follows movement like a prayer answered in reverse. Instead, keep walking steady, slow, like you do not know it is there even if every instinct in your body is screaming at you to flee. And whatever you do, do not look up. not even for a second. When I say do not look up, I mean it in the most literal way possible, because the moment your eyes leave the path, it learns you are aware, and awareness is what it feeds on. I have seen seasoned hikers freeze for just a second too long staring into the canopy, and that is enough for it to mark them. I do not know what it is exactly, only that it is patient, and it never stays in one place long enough to be understood. We used to think the forest was empty above the tree line, but there is no empty. There is only waiting, and I have heard it move when there was no wind, no storm, just the sound of wood tightening like bone remembering pressure. I left because I had to, not because it was over, but because I finally understood it does not need to hunt in the way we understand hunting. It only needs you to notice that it exists, and once you do, it never forgets you, even if you leave the forest behind. It follows in silence, not on the ground, but above where you do not always think to look up. It waits for moments of distraction, for confidence, for the belief that distance means safety. But distance means nothing to something that lives in layers above your understanding of space. And when it chooses to reveal itself, it does not come down. It makes you look up. And that is always the last thing you ever do. If you are ever hiking in Alaska and the trees begin to shake without wind, remember what I told you. Do not break into a run no matter what you hear above you. Keep your pace steady, keep your breathing controlled, and let it think you are unaware. Because awareness is a signal it understands. And once it knows you are thinking about it, it starts thinking about you. And that is when you lose the only advantage you ever had. I am telling you this because I do not want you to become another report, another missing name, another file that gets closed without answers. So if you hear the branches above you shifting when there is no wind, just remember. Finally, because the moment you make eye contact, it knows you saw it always.